Hello, everyone. Welcome to Webinar 3 in our series, Innovative Interventions to Support Families Living in Poverty. My name is Brenda Farrell, and I'm a project analyst at the Abandoned Infants Assistance Resource Center. Today's webinar is presented by Elisabeth Babcock. Ms. Babcock is the president and CEO of the Crittenton Women's Union, a Boston-based organization dedicated to moving low-income families out of poverty and helping other organizations to do the same. CWU's applied research led to the development of its groundbreaking mobility mentoring platform, which incorporates new scientific discoveries about the way that poverty, trauma, and oppression often compromise decision-making and behavior management skills. Since its release in 2009, mobility mentoring has been nationally and internationally recognized for creating significantly improved outcomes in earnings, educational attainment, and family stability in extremely low-income families. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that you can ask questions using the chat feature in the lower left portion of your screen. We will leave some time at the end of the presentation for questions, but please feel free to chat your questions in at any point. Questions will be answered in the order in which they are received. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Babcock. Ms. Babcock, thank you for being here with us today.
It is lovely to be with all of you on this beautiful spring day and to spend the next hour with you talking about how all of us together can use this wonderful new emerging brain science to shape the way that we work with low-income families to help them both improve their economic outcomes but also improve their family stability at the same time. So thanks for committing this time, and we'll have about an hour together where I'll be sharing slides, and then there will be time for questions after that. So first of all, what I want to share with you is that, I'm sorry. So first of all, what I want to share with you is just a little bit about my own organization quickly. We are a Boston-based organization that helps low-income families move out of poverty, but we do it in a pretty unique way. We're what's known as an action tank, and so what that means is we have direct services and we work directly with about 1,400 individuals a year in the greater Boston and Broad, Massachusetts area. Providing them with housing, training for jobs and connection into jobs, and also providing them with parenting education and other services. We do this within a broad-based coaching framework that we call mobility mentoring that I'm going to be describing to you. So we work directly with families on the ground. In addition to that, we have a research arm that develops new tools and approaches to help both our work, but then as we test those tools within our own organization, we share them with other organizations and government, and so then begin to have a network of organizations that are using the same tools that is learning together. And we call that network the Economic Independence Exchange, and currently we're working with about 50 organizations and 4 state-based policy platforms to basically implement brain science-informed programming within their own organizations. So right now that network actually is serving about 250,000 individuals, and together we keep trying to evolve our practices and tools to be wiser, more successful, and better informed by families and their needs. So we have as a mission, as you can see here, to transform people's lives by moving them out of poverty, but our approach is one that's very much based in designing new ways of working with families, applying those within. Once things are tested, bringing out the information about how those various tools and pathways have worked to share through papers, but also to share directly with other organizations. So a little bit about the families that we work with directly. We're one of the largest providers of housing, transitional housing for homeless families in Greater Boston, and we actually serve 400 or more homeless families in a given year. We also work with very poor, extremely poor families who have been formerly homeless, now living mostly on public subsidies. We have parenting classes that we run and parenting programs like Healthy Families, and then also the job training that I've told you about. Within within the scope of the 1,400 or so individuals that we serve directly in a given year, these individuals have very, very complex lives and complex history. About 75% of them, as you can see, have a recent history of homelessness or currently homeless. High levels, as you can see, of reported mental health diagnoses, substance abuse, other challenging medical and mental health circumstances for the heads of household. 43% actually have a reported history of abuse or family violence or trauma. They have a variety of cognitive and other disabilities that are known and screened for that they report that serve as a barrier to their being able to work or go to school. And at least 50% have at least one child with diagnosed special needs. And I should say that these numbers, we review these numbers as sort of the tip of the iceberg, because as we work with families over longer periods of time, and it is our goal to coach them for multiple years if we can maintain the engagement, the longer we work with families, the more these percentages actually go up as families develop a trusting relationship and disclose their own challenges. So this is my way of just letting you know that the families that we work with directly have very, very high needs and are very, very complex. I should also mention that they are diverse from a racial and ethnic perspective. So about a third of our population is Caucasian, about a third of our population is African American, and about a third of our population is Latina, and then with a variety of different countries of origin from many of those groups. So what is it we're going to talk about today during this hour that we have together? Well, my hope is we're going to talk about ways that we can use wonderful new science that is emerging from neurobiology, from developmental psychology, from behavioral economics, from a whole variety of arenas that actually come together to paint a very, very shared perspective and picture on how poverty, trauma, and stress impact the way people think and the way that they are able to manage their behavior. This science is, for me, one of the most important things that has happened in my long career because I believe it's giving us new tools for leverage for creating breakthrough outcomes with low-income families. And that out of this science, we can develop new program designs, breakthrough program designs, and out of these breakthrough program designs, we can create breakthrough outcomes. So, what does this science tell us? Well, first of all, let's start about the challenge of trying to be a poor family, trying to get ahead economically, and also keep the family unit strong and raise healthy children. The business of being poor today is the business of having to wage a battle on multiple fronts at the same time. It is a complex situation to be in, where poor families are often trying to just maintain basic benefits, maintain their safety and security of the home and the public platforms sometimes that depends on, where they may be running between multiple public agencies to try to maintain those benefits, oftentimes with those agencies having sort of conflicting eligibility rules and other rules. At the same time that they have to work, because we know that there are very few exceptions now to the requirement that low-income families must maintain a job. So they must work at the same time that they must find a way to wisely manage their money when there's too little of it. And so how they manage their borrowing, how they manage their cash flow, whether they can save anything or not, and build a safety net for tough times. These are all, money management is very, very challenging. And what we also know is that for poor families who are trapped in minimum wage, minimum skilled jobs, that the only way really out of poverty to a more stable life for them and for their children is to get education beyond high school, which, as you know, most of these families, the poorest families, do not have, or if they have, it may not be in an area that's been able to connect them to a family-sustaining career. And last but not least, they have to somehow figure out where the jobs are and how they get into those jobs that pay the family sustaining wages. And these jobs are changing by the day, the ones that will support families. And to find these jobs is a very challenging set of circumstances in and of itself. So we know that getting out of poverty is complicated, and a lot of things have to be firing together well. And as the dragon picture shows you, you have to sort of fight a lot of heads at the same time, slay a lot of heads at the same time. And the minute that you cut one head off, as my husband would say, another one comes around and bites you in the rear end. So trying to whack them off one at a time is a really challenging thing, where families feel like they're constantly under stress and constantly battling the next problem that comes in. We call this the crisis du jour, or the daily events that swamp our families and make it hard for them to get ahead. Now, in order to be able to fight these multiple fronts and to move ahead and to actually get traction with school, career, work, managing your family, and maintaining body and soul, this takes incredibly strong decision-making skills and priority-setting skills. What do I do first? Where do I spend my time? Where do I spend my money? Where do I spend my energy? And how do I solve so many problems when they seem to all be landing on me at the same time? But what this new brain science that I was telling you about from all these different sectors, from the biological sectors, psychology, and also from economics, behavioral economics, what they tell us is that poverty itself compromises the very sets of problem solving, priority setting, persistence, resilience, focus, the types of skills that we need to have in order to be able to manage that multi-headed dragon, in order to be able to figure out what do I do first that's really going to make a difference in my life and help me get ahead. And families that I serve will set wonderful goals to help themselves get enrolled in programs or to go to school or to try to get a job. But what they'll find oftentimes is that when they set these goals, there's something that happens in the given day or in their life that swamps their best intentions. And this science that's emerging tells us that that is a common human problem, that this is not just something that happens to people in poverty, but it happens to all of us. If any of you have had that day where you were just dealing with too much in your life and you sort of had too much on your mind and you got home and you blindly opened the refrigerator and pulled out that container of ice cream, and before you knew it, you were at the bottom of the container of ice cream. If you've ever had that happen, you know how it is that pressures can swamp your best intentions. They can take you off track. If you've ever had that moment when you've had so much going on in your life, so much has been happening and you've had to think about so many things at once, that somebody comes up to you and wants to ask a question, and the immediate response that you have is, talk to the hand. Don't ask me that question. I can't think about that now. I'll talk to you later. I'll try to, fix that problem later. That is you reaching your swamping limit, reaching what behavioral economists call your bandwidth tax, sort of reaching the place where your head is too full and you can't possibly take on one more problem, because if you try to make a decision in the moment, then what's going to happen is you're not going to make the decision as wisely or as thoughtfully as you would if you weren't as swamped or as overloaded. So think about that for our families, for the families that we serve together. Think about that reflex and think about how it is when you are dealing with that multi-headed dragon, when it's there, when the stress is there all the time, when the problems never have good solutions, when the crisis comes one after the other. And then you'll know what it feels like to have the mind that is stressed or tapped by poverty itself. Wonderful research by Sendel Mullinason and Elder Shafir in their book Scarcity basically tell us that being swamped like that, poverty itself, can actually affect us like as if we've been deprived of an sleep. It affects the brain in the same way, or actually can affect our abilities on tests or things like that by one entire standard deviation of IQ. So this is a big, big, big impact. And what we also know is that this impact happens not just in the moment when we're overwhelmed by stress, but also is compounded by our childhoods. If we've had lots and lots of stress in our childhood, if we've had trauma in our childhood, then the way that the brain is built to basically react quickly to stress in terms of our fight or flight response, our desire to flee, or our emotional, eruption of getting angry or responding quickly or snapping, that kind of reaction is overbuilt in childhoods of stress or trauma. And the decision-making, weighing, thinking about the future, what's the best plan for me, the resilience, the persistence that's required in order to be able to achieve long-term goals, set them and achieve them, is not built out in the same way as it is for children who grow up in more fortunate circumstances. So what we're talking about is a phenomenon that says stress impacts our ability to be able to postpone gratification. It affects our ability to be able to persist through difficult times and maintain our focus on a goal. It affects our ability to be able to look at multiple problems and figure out which one to deal with first. It affects our emotional responses to things that happen in the moment and may cause us to snap when we really don't want to. So, what does this say about helping families? What does this brain science say about helping families? Because it could seem as though it's a very, very depressing message, right? Because the message is poverty is a vicious catch-22. To get out of poverty, people have to have really amazing decision-making and behavior management skills to make the good choices in the moment, to optimize their limited resources of money and time and energy. But at the same time, the very skills that we need to optimize and move ourselves out of poverty are the very skills that poverty itself impacts and compromises. So this is a vicious cycle, right? And so what I'm saying to you may seem to be, a little bit depressing. It paints a tough picture. The man in the picture is saying, if you can see it, I need to work to eat, and I need to eat to work. How do you get out of that kind of a vicious cycle? So what I'm here to give you is not this tale of woe, but to give you a sense of the hope that I feel and my partner organizations feel about how we can use this science to impact the way we work with families, because it gives me huge hope and gives us new strategies. So if getting out of poverty is a huge organizational challenge, and being in poverty compromises those organizational skills, then the idea we have to come to as organizations ourselves working with low-income families and as practitioners is we have to come to a way to not whack off one head of the dragon at a time, but to strike at the heart, to say, how do we help our environments become more organized and easier for our participants to navigate? How do we build environments that don't create extra challenges for our participants and our families? And how do we, in delivering the services that we deliver to them, the day-to-day services of job training or parenting training or early Head Start or TANF work programs, how do we deliver those in a new way that not only gives families information and gives families access to resources, but actually helps families themselves build the skills that they need to be able to help themselves move out of poverty? How do we help them build parenting and build their own executive functioning skills? And our own work has suggested that you can do that. And in fact, there's science behind why. The parts of the brain that are used in executive functioning, the prefrontal cortex of the brain, is one of the areas of the brain that is actually able to be built. New wiring can be built way, way into adulthood. And in fact, studies with individuals who are elderly, who have had strokes that have affected the prefrontal cortex, have shown that with coaching, even folks with trauma can rebuild brain functioning in the prefrontal cortex well into adulthood. So what I'm here to tell you is that we actually, as practitioners, we can work with families in new ways way into adulthood that helps them build the kind of decision-making and navigational skills that they really need to deal with all the things they have to do to move out of poverty and stabilize their families. The idea is to strike at the heart, to strike at the organizational skills themselves, and to basically build environments that are better organized and to build approaches that help coach organizational skills. So how do we go about this? Well, breakthrough design, first of all, says let's get the low-hanging fruit first. Let's think about some overarching principles in how we set up the context of our services that can help us help our participants. So the first thing is the enemy of working with low-income families is complexity. We want to try to create environments where the forms are simpler. There are fewer silos and places that people have to go to be able to get what they need. There are fewer steps in the processes that they have to take to be able to get what they need. The rules are clearer and the language is clearer. And so, for example, if you are thinking about giving people training forms or forms of things that they need to follow, the shorter the paperwork, the more the paperwork, if there are multiple steps that have to be followed, the more the paperwork is set up in a way that they can check off the steps when completed. The more that there can be positive reinforcement for each step that is checked off, the better that the environment or the tools are going to work. The less we can use tables, the less we rely on complex visuals like maps or tables, the more that we can be limiting jargon, the better we're going to have an opportunity to work with our families in a more effective way. So the environments themselves, we know from a lot of behavioral psychology that environments themselves have a real impact on the way that our families believe about themselves and the way they think. So, for example, we know that families who see pictures on the walls of other people who look like them successfully completing the kind of tasks that they have ahead of them, graduating from school, being good moms and having good relationships with their kids, having a successful interchange at work and being in a successful place at work, in the workplace, and looking happy. We know, as silly as it may sound, that a lot of behavioral literature shows that those are priming stereotypes. They're giving off messages to our participants that say, hey, other people have done these things and you can do them too. Those kind of priming stereotypes can be very, very powerful, both positively and negatively. They can help set the stage for people's willingness and ability to engage and ability to be able to profit from the services that they're receiving. The environmental cues around noise, the ability to keep the environment stress-free as much as possible, free of distractions, feeling welcoming, the use of positive language and frameworks, all these things matter to our families in a way that is much more profound than to families who may not be under as much stress. Stress impacts the degree of sensitivity that our families have to these kinds of cues, and the cues themselves can be used to reduce the stress loads and to improve trust and engagement. The other things that you want to think about are the affect of staff, the ways that staff interact, how the interpersonal ways, so that the power dynamic is more of a parity dynamic. So we talk about trying to engage in circumstances where the staff people are less authoritarian, less dictating what needs to be done for the participant, and more working as a coach in a more power parity kind of mode, where the family that's being coached understands that you're there to assist them in achieving the goals that they're trying to set and need to set. But even outside of a coaching relationship, I'll give you an example of how even maintenance people can impact the interpersonal relationships that a participant will have with a program. In our organization, as I said, we house a lot of homeless families, and those homeless families are referred to us by the state, and they come to us at all hours of the day or night, depending on when we have an apartment available to house them. When they come in and they're homeless, they'll often be coming with a child and with bags of clothing. And so you would say, okay, coaching must be done by a trained coach, and it's going to be the relationship between the primary coach or provider or therapist or social worker that's going to be the important relationship. But what I'm talking about here is creating a coaching milieu. And so in our case, maintenance people, frontline maintenance people, impact that coaching milieu. When a person comes into our environment with their bags and their child in the middle of the night, the maintenance people who might be the first one to greet them, or the frontline worker who might be the first one to greet them to just help them get to their room, that frontline staff could say to the person, okay, you're here, you're going to room 504, grab your bags, follow me, and I'll show you where you have to go. Lights are off at 8 o'clock. Try to keep your child quiet. You can use the bathroom from X time to Y time. And, they can be greeted, and in fact, in my organization years ago, they were greeted in that very, very, what we thought of as a matter-of-fact kind of way, conveying information. Well, that kind of do this, do that, may seem to us to be just a natural transaction, but to our families, it can seem very threatening and authoritarian. It can make them continue to feel scared about what's going to come next. So let's think about the maintenance man in a different way, the way our maintenance men work now. When a family comes to us now and they are greeted by that same maintenance man, he's going to say to them, hi, welcome to Hastings House. We're glad that you're here. I know that it may seem like this environment is very strange to you, but very soon you're going to feel like you really know your way around. Are those the only things you have? Let me tell you, first of all, is your child hungry? Have you had something to eat? If you haven't, we can work on that. Do you have any other things you want to ask me right now? Or can I take you to your room and begin to show you around a little bit where you can put your things? Are there other things you need first? Would you like to know where the restroom is? Tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your name? Now this is the same amount of time taken for the interaction, and it's the same basic interaction, but it's an interaction that's being presented from a position of wanting to be helpful and wanting to engage and promote trust, wanting to be respectful, and also wanting to ask questions a lot to understand what the participant is feeling or thinking, and to begin to engage them in thinking about what they need and how they might best engage and move forward, what questions they have, and how we might best be able to help them get their questions answered. So this is what I mean about the fact that you can create an environment that is built out of a mentoring and coaching model that is informed by the fact that the more just factual we are, the more stress is created. The more we bend over backwards to be engaging and to be non-authoritarian and to open up the other participant, the mentee in our case, the mentee's mind to engaging with us in resolving problems together, that can happen from the very first moment that someone walks in, and by the time that participant gets to their coach or mentor, their formal coach or mentor, this whole setup is a very different one, and the milieu after they're done with their coach or mentor is a very different one that promotes and reinforces the coaching that's done in the coaching relationship. So how do we move beyond environmental principles to try to create coaching processes that are stronger for our families and build skills at the same time that they help families resolve their problems? Well, the first thing that I want to tell you that we've developed at Crittenton Women's Union is we've developed what we know now is a brain science-informed framework to help our families begin to engage from the very beginning in their problem solving. We call this framework the Bridge to Self-Sufficiency, and it's based on a theory of change that says that if a family is really truly going to be able to move out of poverty, that they have to be able to get all of those cylinders firing at the same time: their family stability, their well-being, their education and training, their financial money management, their employment and their career. All these things have to be worked on and have to be optimized, because if they have a major weakness in any of them, it's going to be very hard for them to get to a family-sustaining job and to promote the development of their children and model for their children the behaviors that their children need to see modeled if they too are going to get ahead and get out of poverty. So this Bridge to Self-Sufficiency is an evidence-based framework built out of some of this brain science evidence. We did it in conjunction with a number of researchers that I could tell you about during the question and answer period. And what it does is it allows for the brain to do something that it can't typically do. It allows for multiple areas of one's life to be examined at the same time, all those heads of the dragon, looking at them all and saying, okay, which one's most likely to bite me next? And it allows then also to think about the impact of the next steps one could make to the future in all of the areas that are on the bridge. And it allows for participants to analyze their own situation, set their own goals, and mark their own progress over time. So the next slide I'm going to show you is a little bit dense, and I apologize. It is the actual Bridge to Self-Sufficiency itself, which is on the internet and available for you to download if you want to. But I'm going to dig into the bridge in more detail slide by slide as we move along so you can see what each of these pillars say. So this is the bridge. And it is something that we hand to our participants and that staff and participants use together to be able to assess where a participant is, and in order to be able to then set goals for how a participant will move forward. So we'll see each individual pillar, but let me just talk about basically how it works to do this work in this new way. When we first started working and we had families in shelter, and they would meet with their case manager, what we then called case managers, what would happen is the case manager would sit down with them and would say, okay, you're here in shelter, you're homeless, and we got to get you out of here, right? And the family would say, yeah, I want to get on a housing voucher, I want to get into public housing, so what do I need to do to get out of shelter? And then the staff would say, you need to fill out a whole bunch of housing applications to different housing locations, and we'll help you. These are the forms you fill out. Get them to me by next Wednesday. These are the additional documents that you're going to have to get that are going to have to be part of your housing application. And they would go through that in a very rote context. Now working with the bridge, this is what happens. A family will come into us and the mobility mentor will say, which is, I guess, maybe in some cases a social worker or a caseworker in other organizations, the mobility mentor will say, hi, let's talk about you and your goals and what you want to be accomplishing, and let's talk about how we can help you get there. And the participant will, typically in shelter, when you say, what's your goal, what do you want, they'll say, I want to get out of this shelter. I want to get into my own place. I don't want to be homeless anymore. I want to get into permanent housing. And then the mentor will say, okay, so let's talk about how we can help you do that. tell me a little bit. How did you become homeless? And the participant will say, well, I couldn't pay my rent. I got behind on my rent, which it takes us over into the money management pillar, and immediately that they've had problems with having enough money. And so then you'll say, well, why did you get behind on your rent? What happened? What happened to your financial circumstances? And the mother might say, well, I lost my job, and I had a couple of jobs, but I kept losing my job, and it just screwed me up financially, and I just couldn't pay my rent. And then the mentor, so we're now looking at the employment, and we know that the employment has been patchy, so the employment pillar is now being involved here. And then we might say, well, why is it that you kept losing your job? What was the problem with you losing your job? And then the mother might say, well, I kept getting called out of work because of my kid. I just had to keep going and getting my kid. My kid has asthma. The school kept calling me. I had to go get him. And my bosses just hated it, and I lost my job. And then, so now we're looking at the well-being pillar, and we know that this family has health care issues that's preventing the mother from being able to hold down a job. And then we would say to her, well, as you were having problems managing the health of your son, what happened? Tell me what happened after that. Well, I had to use a lot of credit cards to pay my bills, and I ended up running up a lot of debt, and now, I've got a lot of credit card payments, and my money is really screwed up, and I can't get my son his medications unless I fill out a bunch of forms, and I'm having problems with that because they say I'm not eligible, and, this is the rabbit hole that we all go down when we're working with low-income families. So here we have a situation that because of the bridge and because of having all these pieces of this woman's life together on the same page at the same time, what becomes obvious is that filling out forms for housing, we can do that, but that if we do that, what's likely to happen is she's likely not to be accepted for housing because of her credit problems or her past evictions. And she's also likely, even if she gets into housing, to lose her housing again unless she does something about her son's health, about his stability at school, about her ability to engage in work, and about the money and how she manages it in the future. And so here we have what was a very simple transactional model coming into a situation where you can begin to see underlying causes and you can begin to think about what do I tackle first. And probably in this case, the case of this family would be thinking about tackling first the healthcare issues of the child and trying to think about how we could help her start paying down some of her debts and also start thinking about her money management and then move on from there. So there are lots of goals that are set as interim goals that might then help us move the family ahead in terms of their housing as well. So let's just look at the individual pillars so that you can see them. So the first pillar is the housing pillar, and you'll see the theory is the bridge to self-sufficiency stands on pillars, and the closer we are to the bottom of the pillar until the pillar is built up and is strong all the way to the top, that the family is at risk of not being fully economically independent and also not having the family stability and the skills being modeled that the children in the family need for good family stability and good child development. So what you'll see here is the housing pillar starts with a high-risk category at the bottom of being homeless and maybe in shelter, and moves all the way up to the fully stable area where the family can pay for their own housing and their own housing isn't taking 80% of the income that they have. And again, their dependents have issues that are significant, as in the case of the child I was just describing to you, that really need additional attention and are causing the family to be unstable, all the way up to the top where dependents' needs are being fully met and they don't serve as a barrier to parental employment or school work. Then we have the well-being pillar, which is divided into two, both the health and behavioral health of the parent and by extension family members, and then also the parent having strong enough social networks that they can actually have folks in their lives that they can lean on and can help them deal with those times of crisis that definitely emerge, and where they can also in turn be a source of support. Then we have the education and training pillar, which goes all the way from not having a general GED or a high school diploma all the way up to a bachelor's degree. And we know that the higher the level of education attainment, the higher the rate of employment, the less the person is likely to be unemployed. And we also know the more they're likely to earn. It's one of the few direct predictors of earnings, education is. Financial management is a question for us of helping families think about whether or not they have developed savings and the habit of saving, but also how they've managed their money and whether they are dealing with significant debts due to oftentimes lack of information, but also due to the practices that they've had in the past for how they've managed their immediate needs versus delaying gratification and other behaviors. And last but not least, the last pillar is employment and management, career management, which of course can go all the way from having the participant being unemployed all the way up to having a job with a family-sustaining wage, which in the case of Massachusetts is, as you see in this column. And we use the MIT Living Wage Index to know what the living wage is in any given area. It is a national index that's available online and allows you to be able to look at the area that the person is living in and also their family composition to know how much they really need to be able to provide for the basics of a safe life in that particular area. So it's a minimally sustainable wage, and it, again, repeat that for you, is called the MIT Living Wage Index, and it is available online. So how do we move on to actually coaching families in a way that builds their own skills? You know, we can create these strong environments and create breakthrough tools that allow for goal setting and assessment and tracking goals achievement over time. But what we really want to be doing, of course, is moving, if we can, if we have the opportunity to engage deeply or consistently over time, especially with a participant, is helping them build the decision-making and goal-setting skills, behavior management skills that they need in order to be able to become a really first-rate navigator of the pathway out of poverty. And so the coaching principles that are involved here are, first of all, as I said, one of viewing the role of the staff member as not a person who's there to tell people what to do or to give information or to give resources, but has to be a mindset where the idea is for the coach to be able to help build skills in the participant. And in the case of what we're talking about here, we're talking about the underlying problem-solving, decision-making, goals attainment, persistence, resilience, kind of focus, and internal capacity that allows a family to become their own mentor over time and to mentor their children. It involves helping a family develop the behavior management, self-regulation skills that will help them not snap when they're under pressure, but actually be able to pause and reflect to take a course of action that is what they really want in the long run. And so to do this, we have to start first by working with a family to help the participant build a sense of themselves as a person who really can make change, to build a sense of their own sense of self-efficacy, self-worth, their identity as a person who can do what it is they want to do, who can tackle problems, who can set their own priorities, to build their sense of engagement and motivation. And in particular, what we know is that people cannot make change of any kind unless it's something that they want to do, and that desire is very, very strong, and that they also see where they are. They can see clearly where they are. They can see clearly where they want to be, and they can see a clear path from one to the other. So for us to be able to help families, we have to be able to help them first see where they are. I'm here on the bridge. I'm in this location, the family that I described to you. That's helping them assess where they are currently. I'm a family that's homeless with a child with health care issues, with money that's troubled, and I want to be moving on these fronts and get into a job that I can hold down and maybe even move beyond that to become more economically self-sufficient. So it starts there with where they are, but then builds out of that. Who you are is different from where you are. Who you are as a person, I see you as someone strong. Those pictures on the wall show you, and look in my eyes and you will see that I've seen lots of other women who were in these same sets of circumstances who have been able to do exactly what it is that you want to do. And I see you as that kind of person. So you're trying to build in them a sense of their own self-worth, self-efficacy, and then talk with them about where they want to be. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be in a permanent house? We can work on that with you. Do you want to be in a job? We can help you do that. We can partner together to do that. Do you want to be a person who's actually something else? And they may say they want to be a lawyer or they want to be a whatever. That motivation to be something, to change, has to be very powerful, to be motivating. And then what we have to do is we have to be able to help the participants say, okay, in order for me to do this, to be in permanent housing, to be in a good job, what do I think I need to tackle first? And in the case of the family that I was telling you about, probably what's going to become apparent through the conversation is working on their son's healthcare issue, on her son's healthcare issue, and maybe getting some primary care. So you start to map out a one foot in front of the other set of goals that are mapped out between the coach and the participant, so that they can see the first step and then the second step that can help them get connected to that ultimate goal that they have. Where they are has to be clear. The goal has to be clear. The pathway ahead has to get started, and that first step has to seem believable, or those first sets of steps need to seem believable. Those steps need to be taken, and when they are taken, they need to be reinforced and encouraged. They need to be noted. So when the woman makes an appointment to take her son for his asthma to be treated, that's a step, and that's a good positive step. When the appointment gets made, that's another step. And that when the appointment is done and she gets that visit done, that's another positive step. When the appointment ends up with a treatment plan and that treatment plan is put in place and the son's asthma is better controlled, that's another step. And so each step leads to the next step, and sometimes more than one goal will be set in a coaching session, but they build off of each other. And what's happening in the process of setting these steps, these goals in place, is a coaching process that is building executive functioning and behavior management, because in each time the coach meets with the participant, each time there is a process of saying, where are they now? Where do they want to be? What's the logical process to move forward? What do I need to know to go ahead? What do I need to do? What are the steps I need to take? And if there are things that need to be done, sometimes chances to role play those things. Like if I'm going to apply for a job, what's that going to entail? And thinking about the plan B if something falls apart. If my bus doesn't work, what am I going to do to get to that appointment on time or that interview on time? And each time the interaction happens where they're assessing where they are, where they want to be, what the path is to get to where they want to be. That goal is set. The process is looking for the failures, the potential places of failure, and planning for those, and planning for how to basically execute on the steps. That process of over and over and over again doing problem solving, goal setting, planning, priority setting between different competing needs, interpersonal practicing of behaviors and self-regulation, that coaching process becomes the way that the new brain wiring is built. It's important to reinforce it, and staff need to have it reinforced. So what we do is we create ways of tracking goals where when a goal is set, we know what the participant and the coach has basically decided were the steps that needed to be taken. The steps are then measured. Were they taken or were they not taken? And each time something was successfully completed, and it's, we're recording that this goal or step was completed, it's creating a virtuous positive reinforcement loop that lets people realize, yeah, I can do stuff, and yeah, I can move ahead. And as they see themselves starting to move ahead on the bridge, they can see the movement. And in a few months' time, the movement can be quite significant. In a few years' time, even before a few years' time, it can begin to be life-changing. Because what's happening at the same time as good stuff is being done, people are making positive steps, getting jobs, increasing their earnings, going to school, piling up credits, getting their kids connected into resources, getting IEP plans in place. As all these things are happening that are strengthening the family and decreasing the stresses on the family. At the same time all this is happening, they're seeing progress being made toward their dreams. They're beginning to realize how strong they are and how capable they are of making change. And over time what happens is the decision-making skills are being improved every step of the way until finally they're at a place where they really are completely capable. And we actually have families coming in to do this. They'll come in and they'll throw their goals contracts down on the table and say, I don't really need you to talk with me about this. I've decided what I need to do, and this is what I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks or months. Here's my goals. So they know how to do it for themselves. And we can just fall away because they don't need us anymore. Of course, what we want to do is we want to reinforce all these good steps with incentive systems. And so and incentives are really important. And what do I mean by incentives? Well, I mean the attaboys, the pat on the back, the geez, look how far you've come, the measuring of progress, things that are tangible. People who make good steps, we oftentimes they'll have access to resources that they want to have access to. So opportunities to go to things or join things, join other groups, or be promoted, or have, in the case of sheltering, maybe have some benefits that they want to have in the shelter, access to different resources. So it doesn't have to be monetary, but we do monetary and tangible resources too, and I know our partner agencies that we're working with across the country do as well. Everything from coffee, what we have here in New England, Dunkin' Donuts cards, to bus passes, to movie tickets, to entering into raffles. And in our deepest dive programs, we have asset matching, and we also have significant cash rewards. And the more difficult, more multi-step, more challenging the goal is that's achieved, like maybe completing a semester of college with a grade point average of B or higher. We're going to give families in some of our programs that are completing a semester of college, we're going to give them $250 for completing each semester if they've done it in a positive way, and if their grade point is high enough, actually giving them more funds than that. So we use a variety of different incentives. And what's really important about incentives is that they should be earned and not awarded. In other words, people know from the get-go what will happen if they achieve a goal, not that it's something that you are staff are sort of awarding as a gift or a pat on the back. So what happens when you put all these pieces together? What starts to happen? Well, within our organization, what starts to happen is really, really funky goals, funky achievements. Great stuff starts bubbling up. We've drastically changed our own outcomes over the past 7 years that we've been doing this kind of coaching. Our own outcomes as an organization have really exponentially improved. Our participants in comparison to the community at large, the community comparisons are very, very high. I'll give you some in a minute. But this has also been happening with our partnering organizations. They have also had these kind of breakthrough outcomes. So for last year, for example, we had 876 goals that were set by the 400 or so families that we were mentoring, and there were intermediate steps between those goals as well. Of the 800, we had more than that set, but 876 were closed. So we probably had about 1,000 or 1,200 goals that were being set, some of which carried over from one year to another. But of the 876 goals that were closed, 614 were closed successfully, or a 70% goals completion rate, successful goals completion rate. In behavioral arenas like stopping smoking or losing weight or any of these behavior change arenas, 70% successful goal completion is just really, really high rates. You typically have goals completion rates of about 20% or so in most of these behavior change arenas. We could talk more. And you can see by pillars of the bridge how those participation successful goals completion rates varied. And what I want to highlight here is look at the family stability goals. Our families are really, really executing well on the goals that they're setting for improving their family stability. So we know that they're getting career and economic gains, but and well-being gains, but they're also improving their family stability as well. And I think the reason for this is multifold. We could get into lots of details, but I think in large part because of the 400 or so families that we mentored in 2015, many of them were in shelter. The outcomes in the career or education were more difficult to execute on because they were there for a year or a year and a half, and you don't usually see those education and career outcomes as quickly. But family outcomes can start really, really early on. So let me share more with you overall. Of the folks that we actually worked with last year, you can see the kind of outcomes. Overall, 75% of our families, of all our families, were in school or working. They had bank accounts at higher than community rates. They had upward mobility on the bridge or increased bridge scores at 72%. Of the ones who moved out of housing, 98% of them maintained their housing for a year and a half or longer after they moved out of shelter. So these are very, very high rates, unusually high rates. In most cases, we're talking about doubling the community, actual community norms. For example, in shelter, about 30 or so percent of our families in shelter were employed when they came into shelter. By the time they left shelter, about 51% of them were working. By the time we'd worked with them in the community for another year or more beyond that, the numbers get up to the 75% that you see here.
Hi, Beth. This is Brenda. I just wanted to give you a 10-minute warning. So you can
Great.
go another 10 minutes or so.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm almost done. So what you can also see here is that with the families we work with the longest, so our particular program that we work with families who are living in public housing for 5 years, this is our deepest engagement program, and the same coaching principles and models are being used across all of the work that we do. But in the CFO program, Career Family Opportunity Program, we aim to work with, and we bring families in saying we hope that they're going to commit to working for 5 years with a cohort of other families and who are living in public housing or on a housing voucher. So these are fully subsidy-dependent families who come in on average with the head of household at 37 years old with 2 kids. On average, these families have 12.8 years of education. So they have a high school degree when they start in this program, but they haven't attained even 1 year of college. oftentimes the college that they have attended or the education beyond high school that they have attended is education that has given them a lot of for-profit school debt and problems, actually. So even the education beyond high school is often detrimental to them in terms of their overall bridge status. And so these are families who are very high need, and they come in typically making about $11,000 a year, so working in minimum wage jobs with minimum skills and having been poor a long time. So these are families who are very, very complex with all the challenges that you saw that I talked about in the beginning. Histories of trauma, histories of substance abuse, histories of problems with incarceration, some of them, family members with incarceration, just very complex families. And as you can see, by the time we've worked with them on average about 3 years, you can see the outcomes that we're able to achieve with them. By the time we've worked with them on an average of about 3 years, they're making about $20 an hour. 56% of them are in school and working, and 79% of them have completed some form of post-secondary education, college degrees and certificate programs, and are making, by the time they're in year 5 or just about to graduate, they're making on average $26, $27 an hour, and they've also saved about over $3,000 of their own money. Most of them have improved their credit scores, and of course the child outcomes that are associated with these families are also very, very strong, meaning that their children are having IEP plans completed, their children have medical interventions that have been established, their children have improved behavior in school and have also improved grades and grade outcomes. So what I can tell you is on the horizon that you can't see from these slides is that for 2 years now, our organization has also been doing goal setting and coaching with children. And we have developed a Child Bridge to a Brighter Future, which we did in conjunction with the Harvard Center on the Developing Child. We actually did most of the development, and they were wonderful and gave us some advising on that development and some funding. So we've been working now with families in shelter and also formerly homeless families doing child coaching and using a tool that is designed to help parents do assessment of children all the way from birth all the way through to adulthood to age 18. It is an ages and stages sensitive tool that allows for parents and kids together to assess where a child is developmentally in terms of their education, their health, their executive functioning, their socialization, and their life skills building. And basically starts out with the parents sort of assessing where the child is, but then moves by the time the children are about 7 years old or so, they can begin assessing themselves, and they do so, and setting their own goals. And the parents become the child's coach just the same way that we as staff are coaching the parent and the child, and we work with parents and children together. In addition to this, and so let me tell you, the child outcomes that have come out over the past couple of years for coaching with children have been just fabulous. They've been very exciting. It's been behind the scenes, but I guess I can tell you we're going to be publishing some of this data within the next few months. I can tell you that, for example, when we have worked with homeless children or formerly homeless children for about 6 months, 71% of them saw executive functioning gains on the Rothbard scale, which is an independently validated executive functioning scale that we just, and frankly, that just shocked us to death because, of course, as you well know, typically children experience behavioral and learning losses while they are undergoing a trauma such as homelessness. And so just maintaining the status quo would have, for us, have seemed like a real win. And instead what's happened is these children are actually maintaining and gaining executive functioning skills during the very difficult period of being in shelter and actually transitioning into subsidized housing. So we're very excited by the educational and developmental gains that we're seeing with children, play plans improving with young children. We could get into more details on that during the question and answer period. So that's very exciting for us. And we also, for the past 2 years, have been deploying another tool that we call our Family Carpool Lane tool, which is a tool that actually allows us to coach families as a whole. It is a tool allowing family members, all the family members, to assess whether the family itself, the household, the home, is a place of growth and support for them, or whether it's a place of, that's causing them problems in attaining their own goal. The family carpooling theory is that if you can get everybody in the car together and they're all agreeing on where they should go, that the ride goes faster with more people in the car together. The more alignment, the faster you can go, the less bumpy the ride across the bridge. And so our family carpooling tool allows family members to say, is the way that we're using our time, our routines, is our use of space, is our ways of problem solving, are these things helping us, or are they working against us? Are we all working to support each other? Are we trying to help each other attain all of our goals, or is the family serving as a place that's working at cross purposes for every member trying to attain their goals? And this tool was built out of theory that's called co-regulation theory, which basically is a wonderful outgrowth of this brain science that shows how if you can get multiple members of a family sort of regulating each other and working together on routines and problem solving, that in fact the home becomes a generative place of more achievement and more development and optimization of everyone's life. So that's out there. I also mentioned our community of practice, which is now 50 organizations strong in multiple states using our tools, and we're learning together how to improve our coaching together in multiple settings. And the last thing I'll tell you, and this is the first time I've done this on anything really public, our organization, to reflect our work, is going to be changing our name. We're going to be changing it on July the 1st, but you're sort of the first national body I've shared this with. We're going to go from being Crittenton Women's Union to Economic Mobility Pathways, or M.C.R.P for short, to try to better explain how we're a wonky R&D organization, research and development organization, creating new tools and pathways and doing all that data management and all that wonky stuff, at the same time that it's all built out of the connections between our coaches and our participants and our staff with each other, creating this positive serve and return, positive engagement, mutual engagement kind of environment where all of us can work to strengthen families and to strengthen each other. So I'll just conclude by saying better lives through science, folks. A lot we can learn from it and ways we can build out of it. There are wonderful additional tools that are available for you if you'd like to dig into any of these ideas more. I'm happy to have you ask me questions now. Hopefully you'll have some questions, and I guess we want your feedback too. So thank you very much for letting me spend this hour presenting with you, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Beth. We do have a few questions. We'll start off with this one. In the coaching model, have you found specific tools that are helpful in helping families learn to set goals?
Well, we have developed our own goal-setting tools, and yes, I think that it's really, really important for staff and for families to have concrete tools that they can use. So yes, we have assessment tools, which the bridge itself is what we use. The child bridge, the adult bridge is the primary assessment tool, but then we have other assessment tools that we use. We have goal-setting tools. We have goals contracts, so we have agreements that are between participants and their staff around what each person is going to do and when they're going to check in with each other next and what's going to happen in the meantime. And then we have a lot of tracking tools that allow us to be able to see what was agreed upon and what's happened over time, and allow staff and participants to be able to share in their progress. So yes, the tools are really, really necessary to give to staff so that they can work effectively, and for participants so that they can grow their own skills.
Okay, are any of the families that you have worked with veterans? Is the mentoring the same for these families?
Yes, we do serve veterans. We do have some veterans in our population. And what I would say is that mentoring is different for every kind of family. So the idea of coaching is to create a standardized but individual process of working with individuals with their strengths and their needs. And you use a standard approach, but an individual sort of set of ways of nuancing that approach, and certainly setting individual goals and priorities based on the individual needs. And we know from our partners, we have organizations using our tools that are anti-recidivism organizations, job training organizations, early Head Start organizations, state welfare to work programs, state community college programs, veterans programs, shelters. It's just these tools are being used in a whole host of different settings, and they're being tweaked and evolved for those particular settings and their particular population needs.
Do you work with parents whose children are in foster care?
Yes, we do. We work with parents whose children are in foster care, and we also work with parents whose children are involved in the juvenile justice system and even incarcerated. So we actually have family mentoring that we have done with parents with children over the phone, trying to ease and with their case managers in their particular juvenile justice arena, or their foster parents, trying to ease the transitions and the goals that the parents and children are making together to reunite the family.
Okay, do you have clients dealing with substance use issues, and how is the coaching process adjusted to help these clients?
Yes, we definitely have lots of participants with substance abuse histories who may be in various stages of treatment. So I guess what I would say first of all is that when our participants have a particular mental health or substance abuse or medical challenge where they are working with a medical provider or a therapist or whatever who is not within our coaching milieu, what we will do is we'll work with participants to set their own goals for treatment. So our participants may have a goal to meet with their therapist once a week, or to attend their substance abuse 12-step program every day, or to successfully complete a course of treatment for them or their children. What we do is they set down that goal for themselves with their Crittenton Women's Union coach. And that will be noted in the goals system. And then what happens is they will come in and provide proof from their therapist. The therapist will say, yes, this person actually came and saw me 5 times, and yes, they successfully completed their goals for treatment with me for this period of time, or the 12-step program will validate that they attended the 12-step program. When we get that validation that they achieved their goal, we don't have to know what they were specifically doing with their therapist or what they were doing in that therapeutic milieu. We can if they want us to, and we do work directly with therapists when participants want us to, but we don't have to, and can still then note that the goal has been achieved and give them rewards for having achieved the goal, and note it in the system and track it as a successful process and outcome. And so yes, we do. We work with them. And in fact, here's what's interesting to me. I was a clinician in my early life, and I never would have expected to see participants within our own programs setting goals like, for example, coming off of their Suboxone, weaning themselves off of their Suboxone, their methadone treatment, their treatment for, substitute treatment for their opiate addiction. We would never set a goal like that with them or encourage them to set a goal, but some of our participants have set goals like that for themselves and have successfully done that very thing. So not only do we find that this supports the course of substance abuse treatment for the full course, all the way from early treatment into what I just described, but that the growth of the multiple areas of a person's life, their management, behavior management, their ability to delay gratification, to problem solve, to reduce the stresses in their life, all of these things really support the substance abuse treatment that they may or may not be going through.
Okay. How can families get enrolled in this program?
Well, in our case, in the case of our organization, they come to us through a variety of portals. They come, as I said, in the middle of the night with their bags because they're homeless and they're landing in one of our housing facilities, and we start coaching them there. Or they may go through. We have supported housing environments. We have healthy family parenting programs that we run, all of which are then offered additional coaching, or the coaching is embedded in the work that we're doing. There are also families who apply to be in deeper engagement cohort models where they're setting themselves up, like in the CFO program I described, to be a part of a group of families making a common journey over multiple years. So it's everything from people just landing on us who are referred by the state to people applying for deeper level of engagement programs. We never coach unless families are willing to have us coach. As I said, we have a coaching environment that all staff are trained in brain science and are trained in these more coaching modalities, as I was referring to with the maintenance man I was telling you about. But the overt kind of skill-building coaching with goal setting and whatnot is done in a more comprehensive way only when families want us to. And family coaching in particular is done only when families want us to.
Someone asked, does substance abuse, mental health, or other beginning issues have to be addressed before starting on the bridge? How do you respond or support when there is major bridge change, such as loss of a job, etc.? And what is your staff to case number ratio?
Well, first of all, yes, we work with families who are still in various stages of combating their substance abuse. So yes, we do have family or their mental health issues who may have untreated mental health issues. We have many families who have untreated depression and other untreated mental health issues. So we believe that you can start coaching with families even when they have active mental health challenges. However, it is very, very difficult to make major inroads in any of the goals achievement process until active mental health challenges are being addressed. And so usually if there is apparent an active mental health diagnosis or substance abuse diagnosis, early goal setting or early work is going to be done on trying to get people plugged into good services and get those the treatment needed that the person needs to sort of then begin to be able to clear their head a little bit and be able to engage more fully. Certainly in the heavy engagement, the multi-year commitment kind of programs, we screen for those kind of problems and do not take people into deep engagement programs who have untreated active mental health diagnoses. So the level of engagement that we have with families varies based on their abilities to engage, and their abilities to engage are definitely going to be affected by their mental health or substance abuse challenges. And could you tell me then the next question that you had, because there were three there?
Yes. How do you respond when there is a major bridge change, such as the loss of a job or child hospitalization? And
yes.
Also, what is your staff to case number ratio?
Okay. So the bumper sticker happens. These in all our lives. In all our lives, things happen that take us off the original plan. All of us are deploying Plan B all the time. And in our families, of course, they have more of these kind of challenges than they might have if they weren't in poverty. So we have families who have members of their family incarcerated. We have families where, there have been murders in the same building that the family lives in. We have families whose homes have burned down in the middle of their coaching processes. These kind of setbacks are just endemic with our families. And what we're trying to do with these families is help them understand that that having something happen doesn't mean that you throw up your hands and your goals all go away. Having something bad happen triggers then looking at the bridge again and saying, okay, what's my plan B? How do I work around this problem? How do I stay on track to attain my goal? And what are the different ways that I can deal with this crisis at the same time that I continue to move ahead? So we've had families that have, as I said, I can think of one family in particular who was in college, pregnant with her second child, working at the time that her home burned down. And she was about to have a baby and was ready to just drop out of school, didn't know how she was even going to manage her job. And the mentor coached her through, what are the steps, one step or another? Where can you go now? Where can your housing be? How do you keep yourself taking that last test that you need to take so you don't lose all your credits for the semester? And that kind of process of going through step by step the problem solving that you have to have when you're going to stay on course. And this is the kind of coaching that builds resilience and gives families the strengthened underpinnings with which to deal with crisis themselves and realize that they can, as all of us have to. And the coaching ratios vary. When we're working with families who are doing like the CFO program that I told you about, that is, the goal of the CFO program is that by year 5, these fully subsidy dependent families will be making, $23, $24 an hour, and will have money saved in the bank and will have achieved the education that they need to be able to do that. And when we're working in those kind of multi-year deep dive kind of programs with cohorts that are peer-to-peer supporting each other, the caseloads in the very beginning with new people where we're meeting with them weekly even in the beginnings are 1 to 12, 1 to 14. But as the families get more experienced or as you get a more blended model of people who've been doing this work longer, so the cohort ages, and you have people who know how to do this kind of problem solving and whatnot in the group, then the caseloads go from 1 to 12 or 14 up to 1 to 25 or so, because you have folks that are not needing you as much and the needs aren't as intensive. And then when we're working with families who are just in shelter or are just starting to engage, and not all of them are going to engage fully, and they'll engage and then disengage, and you'll just try to get them to come back in and engage again. Those caseloads can be as high as 1 in 40 or more. And then we have what we call community engagement specialists, who are folks who specialize in just working with cohorts of folks who are out in the community who are asking questions and are sort of on maintenance mode, if you would. And those caseloads are even higher.
Do you have specific training for new staff to ensure they are coaching in a way that reflects your philosophy? If so, how extensive is it?
Yes, we do have a coaching curriculum, and the coaching curriculum is something that overall for our own staff takes about 40 hours of training, but it's done in a couple of days of intensive training, and what it is done with training, with practice, with then more technical assistance and coaching of the coaches and practice, shadowed practice, so it's building the coaching skills through doing as much as it is classroom. But we also have videos that staff can go back and look at. We have manuals and a lot of information that's being shared with staff around the brain science that I've been talking about and other things. And I should say that also our training is in 3 levels. We have the training that's base training that everybody in the organization gets, including those maintenance men I was talking about. And then for our folks working in shelter, who are mostly setting goals that are going to be for families for about 6 months to a year at a time, those case managers, we call them program mentors. Those program mentors get additional training about how to bridge people, how to assess, how to coach people to self-assess, and how to set goals and how to follow through on the goals. But they're doing essentially one set of goals at a time. For those folks who are working in the multi-year settings, those we call mobility mentors, those folks are doing even more complicated work because they're working across all the areas of the bridge, and they're working to help families achieve a 5-year goal of self-sufficiency. And that 5-year goal is being broken down into lots and lots of interim steps. So taking multi-year goals and knowing how to break them down into small steps requires even more training, and those folks get the highest level of training that we offer. So we have 3 basic levels of training that we give.
Okay, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. How do you recommend we work with individuals that may not have that strong desire to improve their economic situation, such as, they have found complacency or are referring to the goals and planning stage?
Well, I think that's, building motivation is a hard thing, and our families have been hardened to hope, right? They've been sort of, for many of our families, many of them are depressed and have lost their feelings that they have hopes of moving ahead. And so for them, I think that, where you have families that may be depressed or they may have a lack of inherent sort of interest, the important thing is to try to find out what does interest them. You work from what it is they want. Just about everybody, even people who are, in the most troubled places in their lives, they want something. And so the important thing is to find out what they want and then fan that flame to say, okay, well, how would you like to go from wanting it to having it? What would it take? So to fan that flame more. At the same time, to really help infuse them with the notion that they are not alone, that others like them feel the same way and have made progress. And this is where peer-to-peer supports can be so incredibly powerful, because when other women with whom they identify can say, I was in your shoes and I found a way out, that is even more powerful than us having the pictures on the wall or the coaching models that would say it to them. So it's always helpful when you can have that kind of peer-to-peer reinforcement as well.
How long would it take to complete an average goal and close it out?
Well, that depends. You start with little goals. Like the goals for our families in shelter can be 24-hour goals. They can be, that crazy thing of getting up in the morning and trying to get all the kids out of the household at the same time. And it can be a time where everyone snaps and they're at each other and things just don't go well. The goal can be to lay your kids' clothes out the night before. And the goal can be to have the lunch packed the night before if you have to do that. The goals can be as short-term and as basic as that. And then they can also be goals all the way at the other end of the spectrum that our families have actually achieved, to buy a home. So the goals vary, and typically when you're engaging with somebody, the earlier they are in the skill-building process, the more basic, the shorter, the simpler to achieve the goals are, and they become multi-step and much more complicated and more lengthened in time horizon as people move along the continuum of coaching.
Let's see. What funds do the incentives come from?
Well, our incentive funds come from a variety of places. They come from, we do have now some government contracts to do supported housing, where the state housing department is paying for us to be working with low-income families that are homeless, that are at risk of being homeless again, especially young families, where the funding that we get from government actually gives us a small amount for incentives. So we have everything from government-funded programs that fund incentives to having philanthropic pots of money that give us money for incentives. And as I said, the deeper the engagement program, the more of a bucket of money we typically try to allocate for incentives. But I want to emphasize you cannot begin to overestimate how important pats on the back, positive reinforcement, public acclamation, people being able to stand up and share the accomplishments that they've made, their own growth, how powerful this is in reinforcing change. It really is a very important element in the soup.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I see that you have your email address listed on your presentation. Beth, is it okay for people to email you some questions?
They can email me questions. I'm not sure how quickly I'll be able to respond to them, but I will do my best.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I would also like to thank all of the participants on today's call. A link for a brief online evaluation will appear shortly. Please take a few moments to complete the form, and it will be sent back to us. For those of you who are interested, our next webinar in this series, HIV and Poverty, How to Manage in Confounding Syndemics with Dr. Victoria Cargill, is scheduled for Wednesday, April 13th. You can find more information about the rest of our 2016 series on our website, aia.berkeley.edu. Thank you again.